So it's that time of year, sort of mid-season, depending on how you judge it. Week 8.5 of 17 weeks, but there's a fantasy season that's either 11 weeks, 13 weeks, 16 weeks. It's all fucked up. There's no real answer, but it feels like between week 8 and 9 is a good time to call it the mid-season, and therefore do a little NFL check-in with what's been going on. What are the opinions? What are the thoughts thus far and for the rest of the season moving forward? To be honest, I haven't planned anything here today. The plan is no plan. We're going to go through the standings team by team, and I'm going to try to give you one reality football thought and one fantasy football thought for each team, though those lines are often blurred these days where they kind of go hand in hand. And while I didn't prepare explicitly for this, I've been preparing my whole life for this moment. And every Sunday, putting in the reps, putting in the time and the hours to bring the millions and millions of fans out there. Yes, I'm talking to you. This mid-season check-in. So let's just get right to it. You know how we usually do with football when we get like this. We just go really fast and just kind of zoom through everything as fast as possible. And like I said, we're freestyling off the dome here. So let's just get into it, and I'll try to do my best. Starting at the top, AFC East with the New England Patriots, the 8-0 New England Patriots. Obviously, they're the cream of the crop when it comes to the AFC. However, looking at what they've done to get to 8-0, who they've played thus far, the Jets twice, the Giants, the Bills, who are a 5-2. We'll talk about them in a minute. The Redskins, certainly not a murderer's row. We will get a little test here for the Patriots over the next 5 weeks. They have, starting this week, they have the Ravens, the Texans, the Chiefs. They have 5 quality opponents. I think the Eagles, 5 quality opponents coming up in a row here. So we'll learn a little bit more about them. Not that, as far as any team in the league goes, we probably need to learn the least about the Patriots. But nonetheless, it's been a cakewalk thus far, and it's about to get a little bit tougher. On the fantasy side of things, I think James White is an interesting guy rest of season, just for that same reason, because game script has not really favored the passing game thus far for the Patriots. Certainly not on the backfield, where now they're going to be in, playing some tougher offenses, some tougher defenses. They're going to be in more closely contested battles, and James White might be a factor more than he has been thus far. And even thus far, he's got a pretty decent floor. Buffalo Bills, the 5-2 Bills, they are an unimpressive 5-2 for me. Their only semi-quality win is on the road against Tennessee, and that's debatable if you want to even call that quality. There are no players on this offense that scare me. John Brown is nice and consistent, and from a fantasy aspect, he has been just consistent, but he hasn't had that smash spot. He's usually a high ceiling guy, and somehow with Josh Allen at quarterback, he's been a high floor guy. Not someone I would mind having on my fantasy squad. Similarly with Devin Singletary, I think he's about to take this backfield over. What does that mean with this offense? I'm not sure. If they sneak into the playoffs, and we'll talk about the playoff picture later, they're not going to scare anybody come January. The Jets, 1-6. Pretty big disappointment here as a New York Jet guy, as a New Yorker. You thought that, all right, we're just going to hold the fort until Sam Darnold gets back in there, and then his first game back, they come in and they beat up on the Dallas Cowboys, a formidable foe by any measure, and you think, all right, there's something here, something to be excited about, and since then, nothing. And traded out Leonard Williams, rumors they were going to trade Jamal Adams, even Le'Veon Bell on the block, allegedly. So it just seems like it is a mess there, and I don't know where the hope lies. From a fantasy perspective, though, they do have some good matchups coming up, and in those matchups, Le'Veon has the usage, Robbie Anderson, Chris Herndon coming back. The offense could put up some points in the second half of the season. Miami Dolphins 0-7. Doing a great job trying to win the Tankapalooza here for one of the big QBs next year. Although putting Ryan Fitzpatrick back at QB, I'm a big Fitzmagic guy. He's just a gamer. I like the chances of winning games with him over Josh Rosen, which means it might not be the right pick from the coaching staff. They should maybe go with Rosen to guarantee that they get that first pick in the draft, because there are some other really crappy teams who are right in line with them aiming for the same prize. From a fantasy perspective, not much to see here, although Devontae Parker, 3 games with touchdowns in a row, and then this last game, 8 targets. He seems to be Fitzpatrick's guy as the number 1 receiver. Listen, I'm not excited about starting him, but if you need, on these next couple bye weeks, a wide receiver 3 or a flex, he could be somebody to consider. AFC West, starting with the Kansas City Chiefs, 5-3. Obviously, big news there is Pat Mahomes is down. Looks like he might be back earlier than expected next week. They have a bye in Week 11. I think they still pretty handily run away with this division. And from a fantasy standpoint, this backfield is driving me nuts, as I have some shares of LaShawn McCoy and a bunch of shares of Darrell Williams, hoping that he's the one who breaks through. I just don't know where to go here right now. Listen, any of them could be playable. Certainly Damian and McCoy are playable in fantasy each week. But I think that if one player is going to take over this backfield, I have this gut feeling it's Darrell Williams. And I think heading into next year, if you're a dynasty player, I think they start with him as the guy, and he has a lot of value heading into 2020. Oakland Raiders, a surprising 3-4. Everyone thought they were going to be one of the worst teams in the league, and they put forth some nice effort here. I'm actually surprised to see what I've seen from them so far. They've just been, at the very least, competitive. And after shipping out Antonio Brown and not having really any weapons on the outside, Darren Waller has just exploded onto the scene with the help of the rookie Josh Jacobs in the backfield to be an impressive on the field and fantasy team, at least from those two guys' perspective. Tyrell Williams on the outside, if healthy, he was putting up high-end wide receiver 2 numbers the first few weeks of the season healthy. He seems to now be back. If he gets his feet under him, I think he is a solid wide receiver 2 the rest of the way. LA Chargers, and yes, I said LA and not San Diego, probably for the first time ever. 3-5, a disappointing 3-5. They always seem to be disappointing in the midway point of the season. They're one of those teams that seem to have the talent to potentially turn it around. I don't feel confident about that, but the pieces are there, and they're always there, and they always seem to find a way to blow it. From a fantasy perspective, Mike Williams, the numbers suggest that he should have way more touchdowns than he does. And when I say way more in a small 8-game sample size, you're talking about 2 or 3. He's got 0, which seems to be headed for some positive regression. So Mike Williams is somebody that I could be looking to roster for the rest of the fantasy football season. Denver Broncos, 2-6 with Joe Flacco out for a while now with some neck, back, spine situation. Doesn't look pretty, but neither did he. As always stated, I've never been a Joe Flacco fan or supporter. Always thought he was, riding the coattails of that one great month of football back in the day. But they're turning to Brandon Allen, who I've literally never heard of until yesterday. And then probably after the bye, the rookie Drew Lock will step in. Either way, I don't feel great about what's going on here with this offense. As a real team, I expected Vic Fangio to come in, and I expected this defense to really excel. And I saw signs of it. So it started off really disappointing. And then for 2 or 3 weeks, up until this past week, I was like, oh, okay, here we go. This is what I expected from this defense that has players. Bradley Chubb, obviously he went out, but Von Miller and Chris Harris and whatnot. I don't know. Something is just off here. This team has no real identity. I just don't feel good about them. From a fantasy standpoint, again, now that it's going from Flacco, who was not a great fantasy producer for your weapons already, going to Brandon Allen or Drew Lock, really don't feel good about anything here. Cortland Sutton has the ability. He's shown flashes even with Flacco as his quarterback. So if anyone, he's going to excel. And the backfield guys are both good, Freeman and Lindsey. It's just scoring opportunities are few and far between. AFC North, Baltimore Ravens, 5-2 behind the incredible Lamar Jackson. Somehow, I touted Lamar Jackson preseason as he was number 3 on my draft board for QBs. Number 3. And I didn't end up with him anywhere. And he has been a fantasy and reality problem for opponents. and I believe he continues to do that for the rest of the season. Steelers 3-4, disappointing 3-4, but we obviously thought they would have their starting QB, and it's been Devlin and then Mason Rudolph, or Mason then Devlin, now back to Mason Rudolph. They've been a little bit better the last couple weeks. Defense has been playing better since they got Minkah Fitzpatrick. But, not a team that anyone is going to be scared of. This week, Connor got hurt. Although Jalen Samuels, you want a fantasy tidbit right there. If Connor is out for any extended period of time, Jalen Samuels has potential to be a league winner at the running back position. Cleveland Browns, one of the more disappointing teams in the league at 2-5. They're a mess, man. Other than Nick Chubb, there's nothing exciting to say here. Beckham has been a disappointment. Baker has been maybe the biggest disappointment in the league. And Freddie Kitchens has been, comical with some of his decisions. From a fantasy standpoint, the pieces are there, the talent is there, and you just assume that talent rises to the top at some point, and Odell shows flashes of being Odell. But if I'm an Odell owner, I'm probably trying to move him right now just on name recognition alone, see what you can get. Package Odell and a running back 2 flex type of guy for a wide receiver 1. That would be a move that I would look to make. Cincinnati Bengals 0-8, benching Andy Dalton. Still no AJ Green. I can't believe they didn't trade him. Why keep him, especially as a free agent? Are they gonna potentially give him $40 million this summer with Ryan Finley at quarterback, or a rookie quarterback next year that they're going to draft in the top 3? What's going on there? Zach Taylor, I had high hopes for this offense until AJ Green went down, until their rookie left tackle went down. I thought they were going to be able to at least put up some points. They have been a pretty big embarrassment. And Tyler Boyd, from a fantasy perspective, getting all the usage in the world, everything you would want, plus a good player, and still isn't putting up those numbers that you would hope for. AFC South, to finish out the AFC. Indianapolis Colts, an impressive 5-2 behind the Frank Reich, Jacoby Brissett combo, which I am a big fan of. Darius Leonard missed some time in the middle, yet they held on tight. Vinatieri missed some kicks. They're winning ugly. They're winning. They're doing what it takes. They're doing what it takes to get the job done. They have a good running game. Brissett has been good. They have T.Y. Hilton to make plays. They're well coached. Sick offensive line. They have a lot of pieces to this puzzle, and I like what I'm seeing there out of Indianapolis. From a fantasy standpoint, there, Jordan Wilkins. If Marlon Mack were to go down, and he is certainly not a beacon of health, Jordan Wilkins, man, the few times you've seen him in the game this year, he runs ferociously. So if he were to get a gig where he's got 15 to 20 carries of the rock, I think he is in an RB2 conversation. So type of guy you just stash on your bench and hope for the best. Houston Texans, J.J. Watt going out for the season at 5-3. An impressive 5-3 because they had a really tough schedule, and it eases up a little bit, but going into the season, they had one of the hardest schedules in the league. Deshaun Watson is probably not in the MVP race, but right on the fringe of it. Maybe not a top 5 guy, but probably a top 10 guy. And they're doing this with Hopkins being less than Hopkins, and Fuller being besides that one explosion and now hurt, just kind of not producing the way he should. So somehow they're getting by to 5-3 with a tough record, with a tough schedule, and it's really on the shoulders of Deshaun Watson. In the backfield, I've never been a Carlos Hyde fan, always have been a Duke Johnson fan, and you're seeing over the last 2 weeks at least a little bit of not changing of the guard that's pushing it, but a little bit more usage for Duke Johnson, and we've seen his whole entire career, every time he gets used, he produces. So keep your eye on Duke Johnson in the backfield there. Jacksonville Jaguars at 4-4. Gardner Minshew manning the ship since Nick Foles went down. And Leonard Fournette, one of the highest usage rates in the league out of the backfield, just can't put it in the end zone. But between he and Chark and losing Jalen Ramsey, a lot of interesting pieces here, and they just seem like a 4-4 team, right? They're probably going to finish 8-8 and not make the playoffs, be on the outside looking in, although in the weak AFC, you never know what can happen. Foles comes back. He's starting to practice now. I think he comes back week 11 maybe after their bye. Interesting to see how they handle that, if they stick with the rookie or they go back to Foles. My gut says the move is to go back to Foles and let the rookie kind of sit for a minute and see what happens. And I think Foles might be able to spark this offense even more with, like, they have the weapons there. Like, I like Chark, I like Westbrook, I like Conley, I even like Marquise Lee when healthy. And like I said, Fournette playing like one of the best backs in the league right now. They have some pieces here. The defense is not what it used to be, obviously, but some interesting things going on there in Jacksonville. Tennessee Titans also 4-4. All four teams in the AFC South, 500 or better. Titans 4-4. Still, almost always, every year, just like one of the most nondescript teams in the entire league. So I don't really have much to say about them. They made the switch from Mariota to Tannehill 2 weeks ago. Is that an improvement? You know, it has been in the short term. Will it be in the long term? I don't know. Neither one of those guys are the long-term answer for sure. From a fantasy standpoint, you have to watch the Delaney Walker situation in terms of health, because if he is out for an extended period of time, Jonnu Smith is a real baller. And you saw last week, 7 targets, 8 targets in his first start. If he gets the run there, especially in this depleted world of tight end that we're living in, he could be not a league winner, but a guy you can feel comfortable starting every week for the remainder of the season if Delaney Walker is out for any extended period of time. Moving over to the NFC, starting in the East, Dallas Cowboys 4-3, and my gut says it's a somewhat disappointing 4-3, because when they started the season hot, I was like, oh, this could be a Super Bowl type of team here. However, you then look at the schedule, and it was, you know, the Giants, the Redskins, and the Dolphins that they started off the season against. Then they played the Saints close. They played the Packers, lost to the Jets. So, like, when they're good, I think they're good. It's just when they've come up against quality teams, you know, their effort has been, you know, they lost to the Packers, they beat the Eagles, lost to the Packers, lost to the Saints close. I think they could be a quality team if they find their identity and let Kellen Moore go back to opening it up. Obviously, you need Gallup and Amari to be healthy. You need the defense to be healthy. But there are pieces here that can produce a team that you don't want to see come January. From a fantasy perspective, Tony Pollard is obviously another amazing bench stash. Zeke has proved to be super durable, but you never know. And this is the time of year, guys, to be stashing the Tony Pollards of the world, because they're the ones that will win you your league when the Zekes of the world go down inevitably. Not saying Zeke will definitely go down, but there will be some of those top-line running backs that will go down for 3 weeks, for 4 weeks, for the rest of the season, and it will be guys like Tony Pollard who carry you to the championship. Philadelphia Eagles, 4-4. Here I would say a disappointing 4-4. I think they were, you know, them and the Cowboys, obviously the class of this division, considering the Giants and Redskins are the other two teams. They're just a mess in the defensive backfield, and without Deshaun Jackson, their offense has sputtered. I think it's pretty easy to look at their shortcomings and point them out, right? They have weapons, they have a good offensive line, they have a great defensive front. I can't believe they didn't go out and get, if not Jalen Ramsey, you know, Chris Harris was allegedly on the block. It was just like somebody to help shore up that backfield on the defensive side of the ball, because if you do that, this is a scary team. They got pieces of the puzzle all over the board here. From a fantasy perspective, Dallas Goedert, it seems, has not usurped Zach Ertz, but he's outproduced him the last couple weeks. And this dual tight end thing, and again, this is going to change when Deshaun Jackson is healthy and back on the field. The whole offense will get a big boost. But again, in this wasteland of tight end world, Dallas Goedert should be at least rostered, if not startable these days. Seems crazy to say that he's outproducing Zach Ertz. And Zach Ertz's targets, while he's still one of the leaders in tight end targets, they're starting to slowly go down the last couple weeks as Dallas Goedert emerges. And Dallas Goedert seems to be a favorite in the red zone. New York Giants, 2-6. Not much to see here. I think we expected a mediocre season. They have been hit with some injuries on the offensive side of the ball, with Saquon Barkley and Sterling Shepard being out most of the season thus far. Golden Tate missing the first 4 games. Ingram missing a game or two, and a switch at quarterback to a rookie. So, you know, all these things lead to a 2-6 type of team. And if you're a Giants fan, you like to think that there are some pieces in place. Getting Leonard Williams from the other side of town in the New York Jets, I think, is a nice boost to the front here. But the Giant fans are looking to 2020 and beyond when they have some pieces on the offensive side of the board that can certainly keep them relevant for the next 2, 3, 5 years with Barkley, the QB, Shepard, and Ingram. Those are nice foundational pieces. They need some help on the defensive side of the ball, and they need obviously Daniel Jones to emerge. Redskins 1-7, not much to see here. This has been a shit show of an organization. Trent Williams all of a sudden is back, which seems kind of odd, and that would lead me to an interesting fantasy play, which is Darius Geis. He should be back in a couple of weeks, and while this team is usually playing from behind, their defense is not terrible. They haven't been blown out often, and with Trent Williams back, maybe the running game becomes a thing, and Darius Geis is a super talented guy, somebody that if you have the room, maybe you want to take a flyer and stash him on your bench. NFC West, surprise of the league, San Francisco 49ers at 7-0. Undefeated, unbelievable, really, when it comes down to it. This defense has been remarkable, truly. Because on the offensive side of the ball, in today's league where, open it up and people are beating you by the pass to establish the run, the 49ers are doing it the old-fashioned way with a really solid running game, a really solid pressure-packed defense, and just getting it done, man. Kudos to Kyle Shanahan. The one thing I will point out is, again, the schedule has not been a murderer's row, and they have some tough ones coming up. They still have 2 with the Seahawks. They've got 1 with the Saints. They've got the Packers. They've got the Ravens. They've got the Rams. So the 49ers, they're not going to go undefeated, and I'm not even sure they're going to get a bye when it comes down to it. But we'll talk about playoff picture at the end of this. From a fantasy perspective, that backfield is tricky because Tevin Coleman back and exploded this past weekend, but all 4 of these running backs, and who carries 4 running backs? Nobody in this league except the 49ers, and all 4 of them have had some inkling at the very least of value throughout this season. Sure, a lot of it was due to the Tevin Coleman injury, but these guys can all play, and if you have room, you just want to have a piece of this pie the way that they are performing. Right? Like Tevin Coleman, even though he exploded this past week, he didn't have over even 50% of the carries, right? Breda had a handful. Mostert is good. Wilson, he was in the game for a little bit as well. Obviously, it was a blowout, and you never know what's going to happen when they get in more tight games. It could just be a 2-man show, but Breda, Tevin Coleman are not models of health, so Mostert and Wilson could get the call up at any moment. Seattle Seahawks 6-2. I think the MVP of the league right now is Russell Wilson. I think there are other cases to be made for sure. Aaron Rodgers, even McCaffrey, even though their team has faltered back to 4-3. Brady, obviously. Just there are a few. Lamar Jackson, but I think it's Russ for me, and not so much talent on this team, and he has them at 6-2. And I think more than any player, he's the one who has put his team on his shoulders when needed and made the plays to get those W's. And in this tough NFC conference, Seattle has been a surprise, an impressive surprise. I thought they were going to be a 500 type of ball club. From a fantasy standpoint, DK Metcalf, 2 times in the box last week. He is the red zone monster that you expected with his massive size advantage. Not a target monster. Nobody really is on this Seattle team, obviously behind Tyler Lockett. But Metcalf is somebody who at any week can give you a ceiling week. High ceiling, low floor. Not the type of guys that I love to roster, but somebody that is not a bad dude to put in a buy situation, flex situation when you're looking for upside. The Rams, 5-3, last year's Super Bowl runner-up. You want to think that, or the media will tell you, the story would be, at first thought, the Rams are having a terrible year. Goff sucks. McVay, overrated. What's going on over there? But then you look at them and they're 5-3. right? And now they now have Jalen Ramsey. They still have Aaron Donald. Gurley, not been great, but suitable. Darrell Henderson looks to be explosive. They lost Saffold, so their offensive line has taken a hit. Cooper Kupp, one of the best receivers in the league. We know Woods can play. Cook's now out with an injury. We don't know how long that's going to be. But I'm not willing to throw the Rams out with the trash just quite yet. From a fantasy standpoint, Cooper Kupp, man. Coming off of that injury last year, just coming back and dominating. Like, not only a true wide receiver one, potentially the wide receiver one in all of football. I liked him going into the season. I did not like him enough going into the season. He is just one of the most reliable, put it in the bank every single week guys in all of fantasy. Cardinals, 3-4-1. Kind of what you expected from them. I think they're putting out a valiant effort. The new air raid offense with Kingsbury was supposed to be exciting. It has been, for the most part. Kyler Murray has been exciting for the most part. There have been moments where it's pretty questionable what you expect from a rookie coach and a rookie QB. But now with some injuries, David Johnson, Chase Edmonds, Christian Kirk though coming back, Patrick Peterson back, I think they'll probably be what they've been, which is a team that is most of the time competitive-ish, but usually exciting in a game that you want to have on the screen. From a fantasy standpoint, Christian Kirk, like I just mentioned, is coming back, and I expect him to be a high-end wide receiver 3, middling wide receiver 2 for the rest of the year, as Kyler Murray's go-to 9-10 targets a game for Christian Kirk moving forward, assuming he stays healthy. NFC North, Green Bay Packers 7-1 behind, like I said, MVP candidate Aaron Rodgers. And this is another pretty big surprise here. No one was expecting them to run out and take the NFC North by storm like this. And they've been doing it with defense, with the running game. Rodgers has only needed to be spectacular Aaron Rodgers once or twice this season. Obviously, he can still make the throws. We know how great he is in that respect. But there was some questioning of Rodgers and his legacy this year, as recent as a month ago, even with them undefeated at that point or one loss. But slowly and surely, some island games the last couple weeks where you really got to watch them perform and watch him perform, and he did. And now you have his team at 7-1 behind a nice dual threat in the backfield, and this is out without their best offensive player, Devontae Adams. So Adams coming back in the next week or two, Rodgers playing at a high level, the defense playing well. This is a team to be reckoned with, because they can beat you in multiple ways, right? When Rodgers needs to put up a lot of points, he can still do it, but he hasn't needed to do it behind Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, and that defense. From a fantasy standpoint, with Devontae Adams coming back, you have to get those Jake Kumaro and Alan Lazards off of your roster. But Marquez Valdez-Scantling, MVS, let's just stick with that. He's a real player, and I think having Adams back on the field helps him, doesn't hurt him. He was taking wide receiver 1 duties, let's call it, for the last month or so when he wasn't hurt himself. But I think Adams getting the attention that he gets, I think Valdez-Scantling becomes a weekly startable fantasy player for the rest of the season. Minnesota Vikings at 6-2, really impressive with what they've done. Really impressed with what they've done here. Only throwing the ball 10 times the first week, and now have basically turned Kirk Cousins into a juggernaut before this last week when they didn't really need to throw the ball. But they're now proving that they can beat you multiple ways too. Obviously, Dalvin Cook, one of the best running backs in the league, behind a strong offensive line, a solid defense, and when Kirk Cousins lets it rip, he's got the guys on the outside, and Diggs and Thielen, maybe the best wide receiver combo in the entire NFL, and they can put up points, and they can stop you. They're a team that you don't want to face in the playoffs unless Kirk Cousins, reverts back into the Kirk Cousins that we all know and don't love. From a fantasy standpoint, Alexander Mattison looks to be a monster if Dalvin Cook were to go down. And like I said a number of times thus far, those are the type of guys you want stashed on your bench right now because Dalvin, as we know, is prone to injury over the last couple of years. And if that were to happen, I doubt Madison is available in any leagues right now. But if that were to happen, Madison is a league winner. Detroit Lions, 3-3-1. Unfortunately, Kerryon Johnson down for the count, but they weren't using him to his ability up until that point anyway. Unfortunately, because I think he is a super talented guy and should be a top 10 type RB in the league, reality and fantasy. For some reason, they weren't going that way. But what they did do is open it up a little more than you expected. They were supposed to be all run, and that kind of depreciated the value of Stafford and even Galladay a little bit from where his talent suggests going into the fantasy season. And Stafford's been great. Using the run game, using the defense, decent offensive line, and the weapons on the outside, Stafford is putting together the best season he's had in last 3, 4, 5 years. And Kenny Galladay is one of my favorite receivers in the league, just a absolute monster on the outside. Fantasy-wise, this backfield looks to be a mess. Everyone ran out to get Ty Johnson last week on the free agent wire after Kerryon went down, and then Troy Carson comes in, gets signed, and gets more carries than Ty Johnson, which is maddening for those of us who picked up and started Ty Johnson. So what's going to happen now? Paul Perkins even got 6 touches. What's going to happen moving forward? I have no idea. I think if I had to start one of those guys this week, it's Ty Johnson, but I don't feel good about it at all. The Bears, 3-4, disappointing to many, considering last year's impressive defense and impressive season. You expected, if you're a Bears fan, for Trubisky to progress from year 2 to year 3. If you're anyone else, you probably knew what you had and what you saw in Trubisky, which was nothing overly impressive. And this defense has just regressed a little bit. Some injuries, if I would be extremely frustrated if I were a Chicago Bear fan. I'm frustrated and I'm not even a Chicago Bear fan. It's just there are pieces in place here, but the quarterback's just not good enough. The coach, who you thought was supposed to be this, I think he won Coach of the Year last year, actually. He just doesn't seem to be using these pieces correctly and calling the right type of plays. It just seems a little messy over there. From a fantasy standpoint, Allen Robinson is still somehow getting it done with this lackluster QB play from Chase Daniel and from Trubisky. I think we can officially say that the guy is back. Like, this is the athlete that we saw in Jacksonville put up 80, 1,400, and 10 touchdowns or whatever he did that year. He just needs somebody to get him the rock a little better and a coach to call better plays. And I can't believe I'm saying he needs something better when what he had then was Blake Bortles and I don't even know who the coach was, Gus Bradley maybe. But he's a solid, low-end wide receiver 2 that probably should be a low-end wide receiver 1. NFC South to finish things off. The New Orleans Saints at 7-1, even without their leader Drew Brees for half the season. Now he's back. Kamara coming back after the bye. A solid defense, a solid offensive line. Michael Thomas being outstanding every week. I think they could use a little bit more help for him on the outside. I think, where are you, Traquan Smith? Where are you, Jared Cook? You guys are here to be that other weapon on the outside. And I think they're going to need that moving forward. But they are probably your favorites heading into the second half of the season to come out of the NFC. Carolina Panthers, 4-3. After an early injury to their leader, Cam Newton, who was playing poor to awful football. Like, I went into the season very high on the Panthers from reality and fantasy standpoint. I thought they had weapons all over the field, and I still think that. And Kyle Allen came in and started using them. McCaffrey obviously is great no matter what. I could be playing quarterback and he would be great. But DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel and Greg Olsen, they've got players here to make plays, and this defense I think is pretty good. They're a little disappointing as a 4-3 team for me. I would love to see Cam come back and actually be healthy and see the old Cam Newton with these weapons, because I think this is a sneaky team that can cause some damage in the second half of the year and get into the playoffs and be trouble if Cam, it's a big if Cam is 100%. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 2-5. I guess that's disappointing, but like, what do you expect from this franchise? What do you expect from this quarterback? You know, from a fantasy standpoint, it's great if you have the right guys, not O.J. Howard. Basically, everyone except O.J. Howard. You know, Godwin and Evans are the truths. Jameis is what you expect. He gets you in trouble and then puts up points getting you out of trouble for your fantasy team, that is. The defense has been pretty good, at least the run defense. Pass defense can't really stop much. You know, they're an exciting team, like especially from a fantasy standpoint, that you want to throw on and see what the wide receivers are doing. But, you know, they don't scare anyone in the real football world at 2-5. Fantasy standpoint, the backfield, we thought it was a mess going into the season with some upside, right? Like, this offense can put up points, right? They got these guys on the outside. They got O.J. Howard in the middle. Somebody in the backfield, Ronald Jones, Peyton Barber, has to step up and, like, have value just by being close to all the other guys, and it's been just a complete wasteland. You thought Ronald Jones was going to spike about, you know, week 4 or 5. He was a hot name in the free agency wire. It just didn't happen, and it's not going to happen. So I don't think rostering any of these running backs, including Dare Ungawale, whatever his name is worth the roster spot. And finally, one of the more disappointing teams in the league, the Atlanta Falcons, at 1-7. That is atrocious, and I assume that the coach doesn't have long here. Defense is just awful. I mean, Keanu Neal, I know he's a good player. Is he that vital? I know the safety could be the captain of the defense and everything crumbles, but, like, man, they can't stop anyone. And they can put up points. Matt Ryan, you know, he's still a good quarterback, and they still have one of the best receivers in the world. And Calvin Ridley is spectacular. They don't use him enough. And Austin Hooper is playing great. And Devontae Freeman isn't bad. Like, there are pieces of this all over the field. They just can't stop anyone. And at some point, it just doesn't work that way in this league. And we're seeing it now. Fantasy-wise, I don't know if you watched their game last week, but Brian Hill, the running back up to Devonta, possibly the backup to Devontae and to Ito Smith, because Ito Smith is out with concussion, he looked like a monster to me. Like, I don't know if he's going to get his chance this year, next year maybe, but when he does, I was incredibly impressed with what I saw. So there you have it, all 32 teams with a quick rundown. I just want to go through the playoff picture quickly, where it sits right now. In the AFC is not great, right? You have the Pats as the class of the conference. I would put the Chiefs there when Mahomes is back, and that's pretty much it in terms of teams that I fully trust. The Ravens are right there as a third, and then you have the Colts and the Texans, right? So I think here's how it lays out. The Pats, the Chiefs, and the Ravens, they're going to win their divisions. Put them in the playoffs as division winners. And then you have the Colts and the Texans. One of those two teams going to win the South. The other one's going to be a wild card. So 5 of those 6 teams, 5 of the 6 playoff teams, I think are good right now, are in. Obviously, barring catastrophic injury. You know, Deshaun Watson goes down, then Texans are out. Beyond that, for that 6th spot, the Bills, the Raiders, the Chargers, the Jags, the Titans, the Steelers. Even at 3-4, I think the Steelers, the Chargers at 3-4, I think they're alive in this mix. Basically, point being, a not good team is going to be in the AFC playoffs for sure, without question. And you can give me the Bills being the favorites right now because of their record. They're 5-2. They're a fraud. And they might get in. They might be that 6th team. But, you know, they're traveling to Baltimore on opening weekend. Is anyone going to be scared of the Bills? No. NFC is a lot more interesting. 9 quality teams going for 6 spots. And I think the way it sits right now, the Saints are the only team in the NFC who you can say have locked up their division. I think you can also say the Niners are in the playoffs because they have 7 wins already. They're probably going to get number 8 tomorrow versus Arizona. And 10 wins probably gets you in at least as a wild card. Beyond that, Cowboys or Eagles, only one of those teams are getting in. Whoever wins the NFC East, I don't know who it's going to be. I think those teams are kind of a coin flip. If I had to choose, I would say the Cowboys, but there's not going to be a wild card from the East. It's going to be one of those two teams, the Cowboys or the Eagles. The Packers or the Vikings to win that conference, to win that division rather. 7-1 Packers, 6-2 Vikings. I don't know who's going to take that one, and you would like to think that the other one is going to be a wild card. Like, it seems easy to say, yeah, of course, the other one will be a wild card, but when you look then beyond at the rest of the landscape of the NFC, it's not a certainty. And then behind the Niners at 7-0, you have Seattle at 6-2, and then you have the Rams at 5-3 rather. And then the Panthers, who I think at 4-3, with Cam coming back, might still be alive and might be frisky. So let's say the Niners take the West, right? Seattle at 6-2 and Russell Wilson and the way they're playing, I think they probably take one of the wild cards. And then you assume the Packers or the Vikings take the other wild card. That leaves out either the Cowboys or the Eagles, the Rams, and the Panthers. I think that's probably the way that most people would say it goes. But I could see the Rams overtaking the Seahawks. I could see the Seahawks overtaking the Niners. I could see the Vikings overtaking the Packers, and the Packers, I could see maybe a 10-6 team in a tiebreaker doesn't get in the wild card spot because there are 3 other teams at 10-6. Something like that can happen in the NFC, which is cool. 9 teams for 6 spots, but it's kind of shitty that a bad team in the AFC is going to get into the playoffs, and at least 2, if not 3, quality teams in the NFC are going to be left out of the playoffs. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. Next year, 3 years from now, it might be the complete opposite. That's how it goes. So that's all I got for you. 40-something minutes of freestyling about the NFL mid-season. What are you guys thinking? Who do you like for the Super Bowl? Who do you like for MVP? Who's going to make the playoffs? Who's going to miss the playoffs? Let me have it. Find me on Twitter at cheller32. Email me, chris@chrisheller.me. Instagram, chrisheller.me. And share and subscribe this shit, man. Hope you enjoy the second half of the NFL season. I'll be watching, and I will see you around. Thanks for listening.